Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Books and Books in Coral Gables. Thank you, everybody, for coming down tonight. Before beginning tonight's event, I have a quick announcement for our internet audience at home. As you can see from these cameras and these lights, we are live streaming this event on the internet this evening. And for those of you watching, if at any point during the presentation you'd like to purchase a copy of the book and we could have the author, just call the number on your screen. We'll have the author sign it for you, and we'll ship it to wherever you are in the United States free of charge. For those of you who are watching overseas, the shipping might be just a little bit more. This evening, Books and Books is very happy to present Ms. Patti Jinich and her new book, Pati's Mexican Table. Ms. Jinich is the host of the popular PBS show, Pati's Mexican Table, and the official chef of the Mexican Cultural Institute. She has appeared on the Food Network, NBC's Today Show, ABC's The Chew, CBS, Fox News, NPR, and The Splendid Table. In this book, Patti's out to prove that Mexican home cooking is quicker and far easier than most Americans think. In fact, these recipes fit perfectly into an everyday family cooking schedule and use just a handful of ingredients, most of which are already in your pantry. Many are homey specialties that Patti learned from her mother and grandmother. Some are creative spins on classics, while others are not well known outside of Mexico. Here to tell us more about it, please give a very warm welcome to Ms. Patti Jinich.
Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you all for taking the time to come out tonight. I hope I don't disappoint. As my husband says, oh no, there's Patti and there's a microphone, which means I'm going to talk till I drop. No, I'm kidding. If you all want me to stop at any time, or if you have any questions at any point, please let me know. I'll start just by talking a little bit about what's in the cookbook. And so give you a little bit of the backstory and a little bit, if you're interested, on how the process of pitching and having a cookbook come out. Because many people think, oh, it's a cookbook, you have a cookbook out, it's so nice. Thank you. And I'm like, yeah, it took 4 years to make it. And it, took 6 months to pitch it. And many letters saying, no, thank you. And me saying, yes, you want it. Yes, you want it. So to begin with, there's a lot that people think they know about Mexican food in the U.S. And if you look at a cookbook store or a bookstore, you will find countless of cookbooks on Mexican cooking, which is one of the reasons why it was very hard for me to get that book published. However, people in the U.S. think they know Mexican food, and I think they know very, very little of it. But I think the opposite is also true. Mexicans, we think we know a lot about our neighbor. Well, not my neighbor anymore. I live here now. But about the U.S., and I think there are so many misconceptions. We have this huge border that divides us and that also makes us, be face to face all the time. And we think we know each other and we think we know our weaknesses and our strengths. But the truth is we really don't know that much about each other. However, in Mexican food, a very different thing has happened from French food. When you think about Julia Child and French food, she started promoting French food when not many people in the U.S. knew about French food, and she went directly to the home. It was her cookbooks that introduced, the very complex to the very simple French techniques and ingredients. Mexican food is a very different story. So just look at how many Taco Bells and Chipotles and, chicken tinga cosi sandwiches are out there. So that's why I think there's even more misconceptions, because Mexican food in the U.S. has come in like a steamroller. You can see taco night, Mexican restaurants everywhere, but it's only a handful of Mexican dishes or Mexican ingredients that have become very, very popular. And then all of the depth and the diversity of Mexican cooking has not become that well known, or people don't know that much about it. So when we think about myths of Mexican cooking, and we can make this interactive if you want, because that'll be a little bit more fun for me too. When you think about Mexican myths, Which do you think are some of the top myths about Mexican cooking? Anybody? Give me one. Hot? That is hot, exactly. That is one of the main ones. Mexican food is always spicy and hot. Well, that is so not true. There is a universe of Mexican cooking that is not even spicy or even has a chile or a hot pepper. And even where there are chiles involved, I can tell you that there's about 80% of Mexican chilies. You know, there's over 100 different varieties that aren't even spicy. They're vegetables that have a lot of personality, as I like to say. Think about the pasilla chile if you're familiar with it, or the ancho chile, sweet, chocolatey with a prune taste. The poblano chili, which is like a green bell pepper, but much more exuberant and fruity. So you have all these chilies that when they're used, they're not necessarily spicy. And, you know, a lot of times the spiciness gets added in a salsa, in an habanero salsa or a green salsa. So no, Mexican food is not always spicy to begin with, which is another misconception of Mexican food. That everything is fried and greasy and cheesy and sort of what we think about when we think about bad Tex-Mex food. And that is a big myth because there's so much in Mexican cooking that's not fried and not greasy and not deep fried and not creamy or sauced up. If you think about the main basis of Mexican cooking, so many things are steamed, no? Al vapor or seared or roasted or charred in a comal. Another myth is that it's not healthy, that Mexican food is just not healthy. And Mexican food at its core is insanely healthy. You have the grains and the fruits and the vegetables and the corn tortilla, which has 0 fat and in fact has made the corn, you know, be digestible much more than if you don't make the masa for it. So there's all these misconceptions about Mexican food, and what I wanted to bring to people and to show people was the Mexican food that I, as a very nostalgic Mexican in the US, crave and miss, and I am so nostalgic about, which is the food I grew up eating. You know, low-key, home-style Mexican cooking, which is so rich and so diverse and so fabulous and so wonderful. And so my angle for the cookbook was, but I want to bring people home-style Mexican food so that we can bring new tools. You know, if you learn how to use a tomatillo, it's not an ingredient that you're going to use in one way. It's an ingredient that you're going to be able to use in so many ways. So that was my approach to the cookbook and to saying this is going to be a different cookbook. Yeah. So that's a great question. And that was very, very hard. And I can tell you, when the book was just going to go into printing mode, I started emailing my editor, who's this fabulous woman, Rox Martin. And I would tell her, wait, we have to include this other one. I can't have that book be published without this recipe. And she's like, Pati, we're too late. And I'm like, don't do this to me. Please print this other recipe. So it was very, very hard to choose. And in the end, and I have so many recipes that I didn't use for the cookbook, but I am already thinking about how to use them for a different kind of a cookbook. In the end, I ended up choosing recipes that are repeats in my house. You know, things that I not have or try only once, but things that I've repeated over and over again, or things that I've given to people and they've requested the recipe and they comment back saying, I made it, it was fabulous, and now it is a staple in my kitchen. So I wanted to bring recipes that are part of a weekly repertoire and that were relatively easy. So I have a couple of moles in there. So I have the mole amarillito, and I have a red pipián and a green pipián, and they're so good. And they're, when you compare them to a mole poblano, so I have the best ever recipe for a mole poblano. It's the best. And I have another recipe for a hibiscus and pecan and plantain mole, and they're like to die for. But instead of having 5 to 10 ingredients, they have 30. So they're not in that cookbook because I'm making home style accessible. home cooking. And when you think about it, all those very complex dishes, like for example, I also make some killer chiles en nogada. They're not in there. And it pained me to the core not to have them in there. But those are, or complex tamales, Oaxacan tamales, because those are meals that when you think about it, they're festive meals that in Mexico or Mexican families make them as a community, as a group. No, te juntas con tus tías, you get together with your aunts and your cousins and you make the mole or you make the tamales. It's not something that somebody's going to whip up on a Wednesday night. So that was one way of sort of filtering recipes. I sneaked in there some that bordered on the being able to do it on a Tuesday night, but hey, come on, you can make it on a Sunday night. And, refrigerate it or freeze it and then eat it on a weeknight. But so that was one main filter. Another one was I didn't include any recipe that had an ingredient that was very hard to find. So I either had something that I knew you could find online, at least, within a day's delivery or in a Latino or international grocery store. I aim to have ingredients that you can find in a mainstream grocery store, but if it called for an ingredient that you can't find in the US yet, though we can find most of them, then it's not in there. I mean, it had to have ingredients that you can either find or be able to substitute. So, for example, there's a recipe in there that I say if you find avocado leaves, great. And if you don't, you can use cilantro. So recipes that are amenable in that way, I included. But recipes that you really need to have a citron, for example, which is the cactus pear, a kind of a bisnaga cactus heart that is sweetened. And it's the most delicious thing. But you can't find it here. So I have a recipe that calls for a citron, but if you don't find a citron, you can use candied pineapple and it works. But there's other recipes that call for a citron and you really need it, then it's not in there. So that was another filter.
How are you able to understand enough of how the ingredients play among each other to be able to substitute one for the other?
So I am very, well, first of all, if there's a recipe either in my blog or in my classes or in my cookbook, it's because it's a recipe that I've not made once, but a gazillion times. Like I really treat recipes like love potions. Like if a recipe has to get to a place where it's like irresistible and it has really clear pathways as to how to make it in the easiest and most approachable way to do it. So playing with the recipe and seeing, if you substitute this for that. So for example, there are things that I know by now to be true. For example, most of the recipes that call for queso fresco, you can substitute for farmer's cheese or for a light feta. You'll get away with it. Or some recipes that substitute Mexican crema for creme fraiche. You can do it. So now there are other cooks out there who will say never, if it says queso fresco and you use feta, heresy. You're committing heresy, and never. So I'm not a purist in that way. Like I consider myself to be traditional. I love to pass on traditions and to continue passing on recipes, but I'm also flexible. Like I don't think you need to kneel down on the ground and grind your own masa, because then I'm not going to get you to cook, anything. So if you can find fresh tortillas, better for you. And I say it, like if you find these things, it'll be better, more authentic. But if you don't stop making an enchilada because you couldn't buy fresh corn tortillas from your tortilleria. Because guess what? Not many people have a tortilleria in their corner. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to enjoy a wonderful plate of enchiladas. It doesn't have to be as if you just ate them in the frontera de San Luis Potosí, like a little flexible. Yeah.
So you talk about tradition. Tell us a little bit about where you got a lot of these recipes from.
Okay, so many of them are recipes that I grew up eating. They're like second skin to me. Mexican style alphabet soup, or the pasta seca, or meatballs in a chipotle and tomato sauce, or hey, you guys, thank you for coming. or different kinds of chicken or mashed potatoes or rice. And then other recipes. So I once told a story. I was on book tour last year, and I went to many places from New York to San Francisco. And the place that I was most eager to go to, don't ask me why, was Google. They have these Google Talks, and I really wanted to go there. I don't know if it's because I use Google every day and I had Google in my head, or it just meant something very strong to me. You know how irrational we are. But I gave a talk there, and I remember that I started telling the story about how when it was clear to my mom that I was not going to go back to Mexico. You know, we came to the U.S. just for a couple of years. And then we stayed for a little longer, and then we moved from Texas to Washington, and then I got pregnant and I had a baby, and then I got pregnant again, and my mom was like, she's starting her family there. She's not going to come back. So she was very angry. We're very close, and she missed me a lot. And she called me one day, and she told me, you know, Pati, you've become a despatriada, which is really like an insult. It's like you're in no man's land. You have no roots. You have no land. And then she took it back. But I remember that I felt that very strongly, and I think that what has happened in that cookbook is that it shows that not only do I have my home country with me, but that I have a second home. So I feel like I have two patrias. You know, my kids listen to the American anthem and they cry. They were born here. You know, I consider ourselves to be now a Mexican-American family. So, because of that question. So I have, you know, my homeland that I bring with me and the recipes that I grew up eating, and I adapt here to feed my kids and my family. But I was joking there saying that I also have a lot of freedom because I'm here and nobody can tell me, no, Pati, that's not how we do things, you know? I've been able to play with Mexican ingredients in a way that I wouldn't be able to in Mexico because I have this unprecedented freedom and I don't have people telling me how to use, you know, I know the ingredients, how to use them, but I also try to extend their use in ways that respect their soul and their legitimacy, but that play with them a little. So I have more modern recipes in there too, that I'm hoping will become traditional and a tradition for many families. So they have a genuine use of the ingredients, but they're like more modern takes. Like, for example, I have hearts of palm, avocado, and tomato and corn salad that has a very light vinaigrette and pumpkin seeds on top. And I consider that salad to be incredibly Mexican, but it's a salad that I came up with in my kitchen in Washington, D.C. And ironically, it's one of the most famous recipes of the book. And I think cooks from all nationalities do that all the time. Like, if you don't do that, then if a cuisine doesn't evolve and doesn't expand, it's bound to die and get stale. So I think it's very important to respect the traditional part of it and to maintain the core, but also to allow for some freedom. And when there's mistakes made, you know, some cooks play with ingredients in ways that prove disastrous, then you don't have to do it again. But if you find a new innovative way to use something, then that's how a cuisine grows. And that's what really identifies, I think, a cuisine as being a mother cuisine. You know, it's a cuisine like the Chinese food and French food and Italian food. It's cuisines that have been able to preserve their core and the traditional elements, but also to continue exploring and growing.
Do you have a preference as far as like cooking food or making desserts? I'm a dessert person.
Yeah.
Don't ask me. I bought your book to see if I get inspired to cooking.
Yeah.
But usually, as my housemate husband is the better cook.
Yeah.
And I'll take care of the dessert.
Oh,
I
desserts.
can whip up any dessert you want, but the cooking, we have the same recycled recipes, and my kids get bored. So.
Really? Well, hopefully you're going to find some new things to insert in there that will expand the menu a little. And I think everybody falls into that. You know, the 4 or 5 recipes that we repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. My kids are crazy for meatballs. Crazy. But just last week, they said, Ma, can we skip meatballs this week? Like, they're fed up with meatballs. You know, how many times can you have meatballs? But, and I'll get to you in a second. But I am a savory person. I much prefer to play with savory and to create with savory. You need to have like, there's different personalities, like people who love desserts and do pastry. I came to Miami this week because my sister, who is a fabulous pastry chef now, yeah, yes, she is, we're so different. Although I dressed up today, I tried to dress up nicely. I'm very messy. Like, I love everything to be clean and impeccable, but I'm not very orderly. Like, I understand my disorganization, but it's not clear to my husband, for example. But my sister Lisa is very, very organized, very precise, and it goes very well with her pastry chef personality. You know, the temperature is at a precise temperature and measurements are more. I'm a little bit more, like a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that. If it's on low, it's on low. If it's on high, it's on high. Like, I try to be much more accommodating, and I think it's, you know, I think sometimes you're born with having one style of personality or something than the other. But my sister Lisa is this incredible pastry chef.
Kids can't live on desserts.
Of course, of course, of
For me,
course.
it's good that my
Yes.
husband likes to cook because then we complement each other.
And I think for me, what's happened is what's happened to you, but on the opposite. Like, I have so in there, it's the recipes that are foolproof. Like, there's no way that you can mess any of those desserts because they're the ones I make. And but so I have, my repertoire is much, much bigger in the savory side than. And you had a question.
Oh, why did you make that book?
Why did I make that book in
English?
In English? You know, I've been asked that a lot, and that's because we're here in the US, and my cooking show is in English, and my publisher is American, and it's an American company, and I try to convince them of doing, if you're listening, I try to convince them of, can we get them to listen through the online streaming? No, I'm kidding. I'm talking to my publisher. He's coming to help. I tried to convince her that we should do English and Spanish, but I think, you know, they need to know that the market is there and that it would sell well in Spanish before we were able to publish it in Spanish. But I'll keep on trying.
Would be published or is going to be published in Mexico?
You know what? I don't know. In the beginning, I thought, why would Mexico want a Mexican cookbook? But I've been getting a lot of requests. It's like, there's not enough that you can have of ingredients and food that you love. And everybody's always eager to try a new take on meatballs and a new take. It's like a salad, you know? You have your secret vinaigrette. I have my vinaigrette. You have your vinaigrette. There comes a point where you like need some, you know, more takes. And I think that's what happens with cookbooks. Most of the people that I know that have cookbooks and love them don't have one. They have, you know, a ton of cookbooks, and they're just choosing a few things from each that they want to incorporate into their kitchen. But I don't know. I mean, I think I would love it just because it would mean a lot to me if it were in Mexico. But
exploring all Latin American, so making an issue that travels through all the
yes,
Spanish
yes, and I would love to, and I'm considering doing that for the TV series. So now we're on season 3. I hope you guys are watching because I think it's much better than the former seasons. Don't watch season 1 and season 2. I look at them and I'm like, yes.
My mom she can't find the channel on the TV.
PBS. I'll help you find it. Because I know the funny thing, the funny thing about public TV is that there's many different stations in different markets, and it's very hard and difficult. So, for example, on social media, I do a lot of social media, like Twitter. So when the season was going to air, so you guys have been working so hard for season 3 to come together and get the sponsors and the content, and I'm so lucky I'm working with this new fabulous production company. That's why you can tell a difference between this season and the last ones. And you know, you see 13 shows and you're like, oh, 13 shows. You have no idea how much work it is to get those 13 shows to happen. And when we were about to launch season 3, I was so excited. And it was going to be the launch in DC, in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And it was going to be Saturday, the 4th at 11:30. And I tweet, please watch for the launch of season 3 on Wheat. And I'm like, I started getting, responses back. When does it air in LA? And I'm like going through the list. Okay, LA, it's Sundays at 4:30. Wait, there's 3 stations in LA. Okay, and on tweets, you can only do 140 characters at a time. So I'm there like, I give up, So I did a page on my website that has all the stations so that hopefully people who are in a certain location can find it. But it's not like commercial TV where a show airs at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 1 if you're in Los Angeles. So that's a challenge. But then again, I love what public TV represents, and I've always loved it since I moved to the US. I'm a fan of public TV and public radio. I love the content and I love the audience, because the audience of public TV and public radio crave good content, and they're not interested in just something that's going to last for a little or something that's flashy. Like, they're looking for content with meaning. That's what I've found. So that's with TVS. Where's my command? I know.
You say that you always travel with it, so I was expecting to hear right
yeah.
there with you.
If I were cooking, yes. I was telling you the stories of the Piggy Cookies. You guys, there's Piggy Cookies for everybody. I baked them yesterday morning to bring them. And my sister Lisa, who has a very sarcastic sense of humor, I told them my Piggy Cookies because I baked them yesterday in the morning and waited for them to cool and poured a ton of confectioner sugar on top like I like it. And then I did the layers in a Tupperware and sealed it, and then packed, said goodbye to my boys, cried a little, yeah, I'll be back soon, and then left to the airport. I'm going through airport security, and I put my bag, put my computer, put my suitcase, and I'm like, the cookies. And they had announced that I would come with the Piggy Cookies, and most of the places that I go, I bring my Piggy Cookies because they're so good. And so I'm calling home and saying, there's a Tupperware with these Piggy Cookies. Can you guys please FedEx them to me? So they FedEx them. I got them today, and like half of them came broken. So so now you guys have to eat the ones that aren't broken. But my sister Lisa was laughing at me. She was saying, oh, so that's your signature, like the Piggy Cookie? And I'm like, yeah, wherever I go, I bring the Piggy Cookies. So the comal, if I was doing a cooking demo, I have to use mine. Yeah. And if I can, I bring my blender, but most places don't like it. Like the first big guest appearance that I had, it was because I had done a little bit of local TV and local radio, but the first big one that I did, and which was the one that I think I had the most fun, was guest appearance on Paula's Best Home Dishes. That was such a riot. Okay, and I brought my comal, and I brought her a molcajete that I made my father-in-law carry for me from Mexico. So they were coming to visit, and in Mexico, whenever you go somewhere, you bring a little gift. You can't, like that's something my mom nails on me. Like, you can't go to a place empty-handed ever. And so I was going to Paula's, and I was like, of course I'm going to bring my comal to cook, because I know that my tortillas warm there beautifully. I don't know what happens in other people's comales. And I wanted to bring my blender, and I insisted, and they said, no, please don't bring your blender. So I didn't bring my blender, but then I said I have to bring her a gift. And my father-in-law was visiting, and I called and I said, if my mom buys these molcajete from this market where they sell the good heavy ones, because there's some fakey ones that are very light, will you bring it? And he didn't know what I was talking about. And he said, yeah, of course I'll bring a molcajete because he doesn't cook. And then my mom brought this molcajete. He reminds me to this day because he had to, I don't know how much, I mean, they're like 25 pounds. I mean, they're very, very heavy. So he brought the molcajete to me and he gave it to me. He almost threw it at my face when he gave it to me because he couldn't put it in the suitcase. And then I remember I brought it as a gift, and everybody in the show, I was like, and I brought these for Paula. And they were like, okay, you know, what are you going to do with that? It was very funny. But so I brought my comal there. So if we were cooking, I would have brought my comal or my blender. But so now I'm working on a next cookbook, and I'm trying to find a different angle for it. And I'm hoping to work with my same editor who, you know, we just made such a good connection. And so I'm trying to see, those ribs are really good. And those ribs, the chipotle and honey ribs, that's something that I made here in Washington, D.C. But then again, I grew up eating short ribs that my mom made in Mexico City. And when I was talking about all the misconceptions that exist between Mexicans and Americans, how Mexicans, we always like to complain, oh, American, they don't know anything about Mexican food or Mexican culture. And it's, you know, it's not so true. And on the other side, Mexicans don't know that much about Americans. The more I've lived in the U.S., the more I've realized how much I don't know about the diversity of regional foods and different kinds of you know how many kinds of barbecue there are in the South? It's like unbelievable. Like there's rubs, there's marinades, there's all different kinds of things. But I grew up eating our hamburgers. Like my birthday parties, my mom used to make these killer, small, ancho chile-based hamburgers. And I have them in the cookbook. And in fact, if you guys are watching season 3, you have to watch season 3. There's an episode that's called American Classics My Way, or the Mexican Way. There was such a long list of them that I didn't know which to incorporate. And the funny thing is that they weren't American foods that I just made up, you know, fooling around in my kitchen. It's entrenched foods in a Mexico City home. I mean, if you go to any small town or even a big town or big city in Mexico City and you go to a Zócalo, there's so many Mexicans here. What do you find? Elotes? Yeah, the fruits from the cart. There has to be a hot dog stand. Like if there's no hot dog stand, then that Zócalo can be called a Zócalo. It has to be a hot dog stand and typically a hamburger stand. And we've appropriated those American, you know, signature dishes in very peculiar and I think delicious ways. And we've made them Mexican, just like pasta. When you think about pasta, you know, for Mexicans, pasta is a very Mexican ingredient, but we cook it in a different way. La pasta seca, pasta con chiles secos. And instead of boiling it in water and adding the sauce, we usually fry it and then add the sauce so it will cook in the sauce. So anyway, I'm working on a second title, which hopefully will have even more accessible dishes, but also being very authentic. But if anybody has any requests of any sort, I'll take them. Come. Does anybody have another question? I can keep on talking. Yes, thank you.
Do you feel that you have, because you have a Jewish background, right?
Yes.
Do you feel that you have any Jewish influences in any of your meals that you prepare?
Very much so. And I always say that it's sort of a Woody Allen-esque combination, being a Jewish mother and a Mexican mother. We stuff our kids until they can't breathe anymore. I mean, I used to joke when you know how you're pickier with your firstborn than your next ones? I mean, my third one is like, He's watched all the movies my 14-year-old has watched. You know, he's eaten absolutely everything. But with my first one, it was like, no, he had his naps at the exact time and the bath time at the exact time and nap time and meal time and sleep time. And it was, you know, I was like a different mom then. But I used to joke that when he was little, like I would enjoy so much watching him eat. And I was so worried about how much he was weighing and how he was growing in the growth chart that I would say, you know, we would eat and I would say, let's go take a walk, you know, like go walk. So then he would get hungry again and eat a little more. Like I had a plate. I wanted him to finish the plate, you know. So that's one part of the Jewish Mexican obsessive disorder. But no, you know, when you compare the two cultures, there's so much in common. And I always think of the relationship between the Mexican Jewish community and Mexico as a country as being a beautiful, positive one. If you compare it to other stories, the Mexican Jewish community has been able to really grow roots in Mexico and thrive. And the Jewish food has benefited immensely from being in Mexico. I mean, if you think about gefilte fish, which I love it, and you really need to have an acquired taste for it. You know, it's a fish patty that's served cold with a grain, and my grandmother used to make it for me all the time, and I eat it, and I cry if I see it because I don't make it that much anymore. But the Mexican way of making gefilte fish, it's just so warm and delicious, and it's instead of cooking those gefilte fish in fish stock, you cook the fish patties, which in Mexico we use warmer, sweeter tasting fish rather than carp or hake, which was used in the Eastern European countries where the Ashkenazi came from. In Mexico, you use red snapper, which is warmer, sweeter, and then it's cooked in a tomato sauce that's spiced up, has olives and capers and pickled pepperoncini, chilies, and bay leaves. I mean, if I give you one or I give you the other and you've never eaten gefilte fish, what are you gonna eat? No? So just like that, I mean, the desserts are as well. If you make a chocolate babka with chocolate, or if you make a chocolate babka with true cinnamon, with canela, or with Mexican chocolate. I mean, so I think the Jewish food has really become richer and more beautiful and warmer by being in Mexico. But so you were asking about me. I always go in all these directions. But yeah, I think it has influenced a lot. And if you think about both cultures, they both center around family, feeding family, you know, cooking for the family. And so in my view, it's something, you know, it's two cultures that feed on each other in an enhancing, sort of escalating way rather than having any tension between each other. But I am not kosher. I'm not religious and I'm not kosher. So I have no restrictions. I eat absolutely everything. And I've gotten a lot of, you know, many people have asked me if I would do a kosher Mexican cookbook. Or, you know, when you're not kosher, I don't have the authority or the knowledge to create a kosher Mexican cookbook. Like, there's so many recipes from that cookbook that any kosher or religious person can adapt or change. But there's many things that I can't stop eating because they just go with who I am. Anybody has any other question?
Last question down there?
Yes.
I checked them. My mom bought the cookbook. And
Thank you.
And then I got it out of the stroller and I started reading it with the handle. And when I found the figure, I was like,
I like that. I'm going to tell that to my publisher. If you buy another one of my cookbooks, people are going to go like that. Yeah. Thank you for getting it. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Okay, folks. So if there are no more questions, then we have the book for sale at the counter over there. Patty's going to be signing over here at the table to my left. Another reminder for the internet audience at home, if you call the number on your screen, it's not too late to buy a copy of Patty's Mexican Table and she'll sign it for you, and we'll ship it to you wherever you are in the United States for free. And those of you who are here in the house with us tonight, don't forget the Piggy Cookies back there in the corner. Thank you very much. Let's give Patty another hand. Thank you.